Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. What a beautiful blessing to have all of you join me today. Alhamdulillah. Today we're going to be, inshallah, talking about a very important topic that has to do with our spirituality. So we are going to be talking today about a topic called Haya. Haya is a topic which is very special in Islam. It makes us very special. It is a topic where this is a way, Haya is something in which Allah shows us love. How? By really letting us love and respect ourselves, and also allowing us to really, giving us room, a very gracious room to be human in a very caring way, and not and it's a protection and a safety from us, getting hurt, getting spoiled, getting abused and ruined. Haya is a very, very beautiful quality, and Haya is one of those concepts in Islam. Haya is one of those concepts in Islam which links and connects our physical world with our spiritual world. Okay, so once again, in this concept of spirituality, we're talking about linking our physical world and our spiritual world. Okay, and so we live in a physical world. We have a physical body. This was something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen for us. And look who's joining our halaqah. I just have to show you. This is Gatito. Hello, Gatito. Always wants to join the halaqah. All right, you are welcome to join the halaqah as long as you have your auntie right there, Asma auntie, taking care of you, then it's fine. Okay, so once again, so Haya is one of those concepts which links our physical reality with our spiritual reality. What do we mean by that? So we live in a physical world, we have a physical body, we have realities in this physical world, right? If I drink this, if I go the whole day with no water, I'm gonna feel dehydrated. But if I drink enough water, I'm gonna feel better, right? So, alhamdulillah, so I try to make sure I have enough water. Whatever we put into our mouth, whatever we put into our mouth goes into our body, and that's a fact. Same thing. Whatever we put into our ears, into our eyes, right? Whatever we put into our brain, into our heart, these are all going to affect us in a spiritual way as well, okay? So some things affect us in a physical way, some things affect us in a spiritual way. There are a few verses in the Quran in which the concept of Haya is really addressed. And here, there's a couple of parts of this book. So in this book, Rising Soul, there's a section on physical appetites. However, that I feel should be preceded by a little bit from a couple of other verses in the Quran that tell us some of our basic guidance that we should have about Haya. So some of the basic guidance that we have about Haya, for example, is in Surah Nur and Surah Ahzab, right? So we talked about some of these before, and I'm going to share some of these verses with you. There's nothing better than going directly to the verses of the Quran. So in Surah Nur, for example, okay, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in Surah Nur, and this is a Kahoot question, which verse are we talking about? Surah Nur, verse 31. This is what Allah is telling us. And I want to take a moment to pause. And I want to take a moment to for us to think that before we read a verse of Quran, especially an important one, we first think about who it is that gave us this verse. I know many of you have stopped by Barnes & Noble or Half Price recently. We have some stories in our family where Asma took a couple of trips to libraries and they were closed for lockdown, and then we had to take a couple of trips to Barnes & Noble's, different locations, and they were like closed at different hours or whatnot, but finally we got some books. And you get books from Barnes and Noble or Amazon, and you end up reading them, laying down. They sit on the shelf. Sometimes you don't read them. They're written by human beings. So it's okay. It's okay if we let those books go by unread. It's okay if you read them and don't take them seriously, because what? Those are ultimately creation. Those are books written by the creation. However, what we really have to understand is that the Quran was not written by a creation, right? The Quran is from Allah. Allah is the one who loves us, who created us. Allah is the one who takes care of us and oversees us more than our own parents, right? Allah is the one who we have to be accountable for. And on the day of judgment, we're going to be standing, each of us, in front of Allah to answer for how we lived our life. So one of the verses in the Quran, in Surah Nur, this is what Allah says. And this is a special verse for special group of people right here, which is to the believing women. I know everyone here is a believing woman. It says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and tell the believing women to reduce some of their vision. In other words, lower your gaze and guard your private parts. Do not expose their adornment except that which normally appears thereof, and wrap a portion of their head cover over their chest, and do not expose their adornment except to their husbands, their fathers, their husbands' fathers, their sons, their husbands' sons, their brothers' sons, their sisters' sons, their women, that which their right hand possess, or those male attendants having no physical desire, or children who are not yet aware of the private aspects of women, and let them not stamp their feet to make known what they conceal. In other words, to make attention of their adornment, and turn to Allah in repentance, all of you, O believers, that you might succeed. So that was a lot in one verse. Let's talk about that a little more closely. So here we are, the Lord of the universe, who created us and loves us so much, and he's the one who would never want anything bad to happen to us. And he knows how everything is, right? He knows more than other human beings. He knows more than the cultures, the societies, the friends. He's the one who's telling us something, and that something is so important for us, right? And what Allah is telling us is, number one, lower your gaze. Okay, so to lower your gaze is one of the commandments in this verse. It also says to guard your private parts. Guard your private parts. It also says to not expose your adornment. Don't expose your adornment except what necessarily appears. Okay? It also gives a list of people, a long list of people. Those people are called your mahram. Your mahram. Your mahram. So in Islam, for a woman, your relationship with men is one of two categories. That's one way to categorize, is either they're your mahram or they're not your mahram. They're your mahram or you're not your. So you should automatically be aware when you're dealing with any boy, is that boy your mahram or he's not your mahram, right? So this is something you automatically should know, like, of who you're dealing with, right? So here there's a list of people who are your mahram. So for example, your brother, that's your mahram. Your father is your mahram, okay? Your son is your mahram, and there's a whole list of people who can be your mahram. But then there's so many people, most of the people in the world are not your mahram, right? So that's something that we have to be able to know. The verse continues, okay? So the verse continues that we don't draw attention by stamping our feet, okay? Because that would draw attention to parts of our adornment, okay? And turn to Allah in repentance, all of you, that you might succeed. So basically, number one, we are being asked to be careful what our eyes fall upon. When you're walking and you're going somewhere, when you're automatically going to see things, right? And so whatever you see is something that goes into your eyes and goes in your mind and your heart, right? Same way that this water or this food comes in. And we don't ever want to, instead of water, what if I decided to drink like poison or something? We don't ever want to take something in that's bad for us, right? And yet there might be a situation where someone doesn't realize something is actually bad for them. Yeah, what if somebody doesn't know that poison is bad for them and they take it in? You know, they're being ignorant of that. Well, same in this situation, Allah is telling us that it's bad for us to just see everything out there. There's times when we should lower our gaze. So what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about here, it's all about this haya, this modesty, that when you look at something, if it's inappropriate, you should lower your gaze. Okay? So this is an act of worship. It's taking a physical aspect and connecting it with our spirituality, with our iman, because if you look at things which are immodest or displeasing to Allah, this is going to affect your spiritual existence as well. It's going to affect your the way you go about life and the way that you experience life. Okay, it's if you take in filth, you know, then that is not good for you. So here, yes, so you lower your gaze. So there are different instances where we may be exposed to something in which we have to lower our gaze. And even like, you know, what are some of those things that we need to lower our gaze for? Well, one of the main things is when people are, you know, dressed immodestly. Another thing is when there's people doing something which is haram. Okay, so these are some of the Kahoot questions as well. So if there's, you know, anybody who's not covering their body properly, maybe they're wearing something, you know, they're at the beach, they're wearing something, or they're doing like one of those dances or whatever, and they're wearing something that really shows their body too much. Definitely that is an instance where you should lower your gaze. Men and women both have to, you know, be modest, right? And so if you're looking and you see a man who is dressed immodestly, you still have to lower your gaze. If it's a woman, you still have to lower your gaze. If they are engaged in something which is haram, it's very common to see, you know, boys and girls nowadays, the relationships that are haram, right? Boyfriend, girlfriend. These are very common scenes that come up in TV, in our phones. You know, perhaps you're at school. If you see something like that and they're doing something which is haram, then you have to lower your gaze. So for example, if they're engaged in embrace or hug or kiss or anything like that, these are haram things. You can't look at those things. Okay, and these scenes will come across like, you know, especially like if you're watching TV, or, you know, usually if you're just going from, you know, home to the car or car to the, you're not necessarily going to see these things as much. But one of the big problem areas is like on shows, on YouTube, on all the popular series, on these social media posts that people make. It's very, very common for people to be in an indecent situation, or a situation which is a haram situation, not pleasing Allah. However, what is difficult is that this has become something very common, to the point where it has become normal. And so we all know these stories of how there was a story of when we were growing up, we knew this famous story that I think an experiment that took place in Harvard of two frogs, right? And basically one frog was just outside in the normal temperature, and there was water that was boiled up to a pretty hot temperature, okay? And then there's another frog, and what they did with that water is they put the frog in the water, and slowly that water was turned up to the same high temperature. Now the first frog that was not in the water was placed suddenly into the water, and that frog had a reaction. It was like, oh my God, I'm in this hot water, take me out. It actually didn't stay comfortable in there because immediately it noticed that this is too hot for me. The other frog, the second frog that was placed in the water from the beginning, when they turned that water temperature higher up, the frog was in that environment. And you know something? When the temperature got to be the same heat as the first frog, this second frog didn't even react. Why? Because the second frog was so used to this hot temperature, just growing slowly, 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 that it became used to the environment, and it didn't bother them that they're in a harmful environment, that they're in an environment that would normally not be tolerable. And the point of that story is that sometimes we become accustomed when the environment is always giving us, these low standards, the environment is always showing us things that are immodest. The shows always have something haram in there. So then we think it's okay because, we're just normalizing it. However, it doesn't make it okay. As Muslims, we know that Allah is watching what we do, and that this whole dunya is like a playing ground as a test, right? So it is not right for us to keep watching like a scene that's not good, or if we're at, if we're visiting a location, there's something not good, you have to do what? This is what you do. First, you recognize it in your heart. You say, you know, you should go ding, ding, ding. Okay, this is not appropriate. Number one, that's the internal part. This is a Kahoot question. There's two parts. First, you recognize it inside. You realize something has to change. And number two, there's a physical aspect to lowering your gaze, and that is literally lowering your gaze of eyes. There's other ways you can do that. You can change the channel. You can stop watching that thing in YouTube. You can fast forward if you think you're clever enough to get it, you know, where you're, you know, really cutting out as much sin as you can. You can change the channel. You could turn it off. You could leave the location. There are many ways where you can prevent your eyes from keep on watching something that's haram. Also, you can prevent something. So if there's a show, you're aware of the show is going to have a lot of inappropriate things. You cannot intentionally go in and watch this show when you know you're going to be faced with all this stuff. If there's a movie where the commercial is showing that this is all about like bad stuff, then you're going to be questioned, right? You're going to be held accountable. Why did you watch this movie? Because you knew what was going to be in that movie. You have to find something else to do with your time. And I think as time goes on, it's the situation in the world, it's just getting worse and worse as far as what they've normalized out there. I mean, now, astaghfirullah, I mean, I remember when I was in 8th grade, this just came to my mind. When I was in 8th grade, and we hear these words, I don't know if everybody is okay with, but there's some sort of relationships, and I think I'll just keep it at that. There's some sort of relationships. When I was in 8th grade, they were like, you will get like kicked out of the school by the students if you're in these particular kind of strange relationships. Now these type of things have become normal. It is very acceptable everywhere, to the point where unfortunately you even see advertisements of stores and retailers who are promoting, you know, very strange kind of relationships. And I'm talking about those that we talked about with Lut alayhi salam. You know, it's some of those kind of relationships, which it's becoming more and more prevalent in the society to the point where it's becoming normalized. So in Haya, part of the Haya is what we choose to see. And you know, you will lose your Haya, you will lose your modesty. It will affect you negatively if you get used to seeing human beings as animals, right? So animals, you know, you see a dog or a cat or an animal, and it's just an animal, you know. But human beings, you know, we are supposed to have more dignity than that. Part of our dignity is by covering in a modest manner. As we know, the first negative consequence that happened to Adam and Hawa is that they lost their clothing because they committed a sin. What is the relationship between committing sin and losing your clothing and losing the modesty? It's a downward relationship, right? That means they're losing their place in Jannah and coming down. They're losing the pleasure that Allah had with them. So, you know, this is just something we need to really be careful about and practice, because this is something which is very much in your personal control. So that can be a good thing because you have control. It doesn't matter what comes in front of you. You have control in your heart and you have control over your own eyes. Nobody can force you to really see something, okay? And number two, you know, it's also a big responsibility on each person, okay? Because this is something, you know, no one can do that for you. So it's a trust, it's a responsibility. We're going to be asked for that. Like, who would want to show up on the day of judgment and, you know, this is a big sin that you're, you know, how are we going to be punished for that sin? If the sin is of the eyes, then the punishment is somehow going to be with the eyes. It's going to be terrible, right? Think about that. So that's one aspect of modesty. There is other aspects, and you know, this particular verse, after the mahram point, it does talk. You know, it states like, don't stamp your feet to make to get attention. So I mean, you know, you can describe this in so many ways. But really, we as women, and you know, men have this too. But we as women are created, you know, as objects that are beautiful, and we are asked to hold ourselves in a dignified way. We are allowed to expose our beauty to those people who are going to take care of us, because mahram are people who are supposed to not violate you. I'm talking about in a normal circumstance. These are the people who have genuine, sincere care for your protection and your well-being, and they're not going to wrong you. They're going to do what they're supposed to do as responsible men to you, right? And so that is why it's okay to be in your family presence with us. And, you know, another point is that really the way the society has become now, and it's been, yes, I mean, it's not that it's just now, but even, when I was growing up, it's, a lot of times the home is not emphasized. Instead, what shows as temptation is like the outside world and just always going out and, having that party life. But actually in Islam, Islam really made the home like a dignified place, a place where you feel happy and content and respected. And the focus should be that we create joy within our home, within our family members, have good relationships, have good times at home, bond with your siblings and your parents and your aunts and uncles. This should be like an example in the society. Instead, what's happening is the society is like showing all the temptations of like going out there and just having fun with like, strangers and anybody who's not your family. That's what it shows. It almost shows you to get away from your family, go have fun out there, and just expose yourself and show, and all this. But that's not really what Islam is showing value to. Islam is giving value to what, the family being at home, and part of that is the woman, really. And so another verse I wanted to share with you is out of Surah Ahzab, because that first verse is about like what you take in, right? But then we also give out, so in our spirituality, you're also giving something out to the world. And here in verse 33 of Surah Ahzab, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, and it is a Kahoot question. It says, to the believing women, it says, stay quietly in your houses and make not a dazzling display like those of former times of ignorance, and establish regular prayer and give regular charity and obey Allah and His apostle. And Allah only wishes to remove all abomination from you, O members of the family, and to make you pure and spotless. I want to talk about this verse because oftentimes it's very overlooked. It ties in with Haya, it ties in with modesty, with spirituality, with our iman and our action. And what it's asking us to do, it literally is asking us, it's saying, stay quietly in your houses, meaning that, if you don't really have a good reason to, go out, don't just hang out like out on the street for nothing. You were honored, Allah honored you with a home where He holds your family responsible to take care of you, and you should be well taken care of. And, and stay, in your home, and do not make a dazzling display like that of former times. What does that mean? There's a great meaning associated with that. What does it mean to make a dazzling display? And what does it mean like those of former times? So whenever we talk about the Jahiliyyah time, the former times, we're talking about, just a time, when people were just ignorant because they didn't know better. So they were just really just going with whatever felt good, whatever was happening at the moment. It doesn't mean that they were like, like bad people, but they were just going with whatever, they didn't know better. They were just kind of going in an unguided way, right? And in that Jahiliyyah time, a lot of bad things happened. A lot of sad things happened. A lot of abuse happened. Women, were mistreated. So when you see these women who look like they're so free because they're showing their beauty and they look so confident, there's other side to the story as well, right? They may be, mistreated and abused, and things may be happening to them because some men are not doing their responsibilities towards these women and maybe taking advantage of them emotionally, or they might be getting attached to strangers where it causes a lot more heartbreak than enjoyment, okay? So one thing about whenever we're guided to things in Islam, I see a lot of chat messages here that I missed. Okay, maybe not. So when we're guided to something in Islam, it doesn't mean that there's absolutely no benefit or no temptation in that thing. Because can I tell you something? Alcohol, we know it's haram, right? There's tiny evidence of some benefit in alcohol, but the majority of the evidence is against alcohol, right? So maybe like 99% is like bad, but there is a tiny bit of evidence that shows that, something might happen where, who knows, it might prevent a small heart attack, or it might do something where there's something good. You know, maybe it might temporarily relax a person, but then there's so much evil that the evil outweighs the good. Okay, so similarly, a lot of times we see something out there and it seems good. You know, it seems on the outside that seems like a lot of fun. That seems like freedom, fun, happiness. That seems like the real thing. But what you have to realize is the big picture is much more than that, right? So there may be, you know, at the end of the day, Allah wants us to be taken care of as human beings, right? And so if we go in this path where we are, you know, not holding ourselves in a dignified way, if we're just out and about, just showing ourselves, just staying around in the wrong place at the wrong time, you know, somebody could take advantage of that situation and you will end up uncared for, you will end up hurt, you know, and these things could happen. There are people, and another thing is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala really knows our human, the depths of human creation, the mysteries. And when Allah tells us things like, you know, to cover, one of the things He also says is, why do we cover? So that somebody who has a disease in their heart does not take advantage of you, right? So we as girls, a lot of times are very innocent. We have good intentions and we're just like, why? You know, why would somebody do something like that? Or you don't even realize what's going on. But there could be somebody, it's not everybody. There could be somebody who has like a sick, they're looking at you in a very sick way, or, you know, and we don't always know, you know, what's inside of someone. So back to this verse, because we're, you know, we have to watch our time. So it says to stay quietly in your houses. So, you know, we really should feel good to go back home. We should not feel like I just want to be out. If there's a reason to go out, you know, you have a practice, a training, a school, you're visiting somebody, then yes, go out. But don't just linger and hang out outside and you know, that sort of thing, okay? It says, don't make a dazzling display. This is a big topic in itself, but I think this is what we were talking about. Don't make a dazzling display like the former times. So we should not be the same as the ignorant people. And nowadays, to make a dazzling display, we also have a lot of other ways to make that dazzling display, right? So in the past, you know, you really had to make a great effort to like get on a stage and make maybe a dazzling display, or, you know, you have to you have to really think hard. And it wasn't like that, you know, there was a lot of work that it took to make a dazzling display of yourself, right? Nowadays, though, things have changed once again, and really, you could actually make a dazzling display just right off of your social media account, really. And so we have come into this culture where it's really normalized for girls to become consumed sometimes with just keep on like posting selfies of themselves and you know, sometimes being all decked out in immodest ways. Sometimes people are very confused about, you know, maybe they think they're just wearing, you know, the hijab, and yet the hijab is not complete because of the way that maybe the clothes are too tight, you know, maybe the makeup and the, you know, these sort of things. And so we have to realize that Allah is telling us clearly, don't make a dazzling display. So in other words, yes, there's times when pictures are necessary. You know, there's times when it is a normal standard, you know, to sometimes have online pictures for things. It is okay to have a social media account where you post some pictures of yourself. That's normal and that's fine. But when it becomes where you're trying to make this show and you're trying to show yourself off and you're not complying with like really the rules, and you're aware that all these men are really like looking at you, and that's another point that I want to tell, is that back in the day before all this, you know, you're very aware, like if you're going on front of men, even here in the society. But now we have, you know, with the whole social media thing, we do have to think about it, because when you put something on social media, you're pretty much, you know, intentionally putting yourself for, you know, men and women to see you, right? So you have to think twice about what you're putting on there, right? You have to be very careful. And it doesn't mean you don't pose. I mean, yes, you can post things, you can do, you know, what is modest and you know, have and still have a healthy life and still put something out there. But just we have to be really cautious what our intention is, and that we're not like crossing the bounds, even though it's so easy it's so easy to cross the bounds, because now you don't have to walk somewhere to do haram. You can just do something, you know, with a few clicks, right? So we have to be very careful. And, you know, when we put ourselves in situations, one thing leads to another as well, right? So when you are dressed with, you know, in dignity, with modesty, the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks us to do, then what happens is that it also gives a big sign to men and to the world that you respect yourself a certain way, and that you are not going to entertain advances from men who want to disrespect you, and nowadays it's men or women or anybody who wants to take advantage of you. But when you lower your guard, and you're kind of showing that you want that kind of attention, it's also going to attract that kind of attention as well. So it's like a two-way street. It's not just what we see and what we put into our body, it's also what we give out, right? And in that sense, we need, you know, this requires a lot more studying, but and a lot more discussion, but I definitely wanted to clarify that this is something that Allah tells in the Quran. Do not make a dazzling display like that of former times of ignorance. And of course, we know about prayer, charity, obeying Allah and the Messenger, and things like that. I do want to, and there's one more thing, actually, and I don't know if it was in this verse. Oh, yeah, it's actually the verse before this one. It actually also talks about the way that we speak to people, okay? So it says, "Oh, consorts of the Prophet, you're not like other women. If you do fear God, be not too complacent of speech, lest one in whose heart is a disease would be moved with desire, but speak a speech that is just." What does that mean? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about the fact that we need to speak in a professional manner when we're speaking with a non-mahram men. What does that mean? Women, when you're communicating, it tells a lot about you, right? So it can, whether you realize it or not, women, I mean, not only have beautiful voices in general, but it can be a source of attraction, but also it gives a message about who you are inside and what you want out of that conversation. So if you're giving the message that you are serious and you're here for a reason and you're conducting some business, you're doing something serious for school, the person who's receiving that communication is going to respect that, right? But if you are giving the message that no, you're here just to, kind of lose your guard, lose your modesty, and just be very free, you're okay with any kind of interaction, that's going to show in the way that you talk, right? And so Allah is telling us, don't be so complacent in speech, because somebody else might have a desire to also freely, mix with you, or someone who has a disease in their heart might be moved with desire. They might be moved with desire. So, that's one of the aspects of women. So you have, there's a physical beauty, there's also some beauty in your speech. It doesn't mean that Allah is telling us not to talk or that we're oppressed or anything. Don't misunderstand. Women are very respected in Islam. In fact, Allah and Islam has brought this respect to women, but also that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to honor women, and we have to try our best to see that good intention that Allah has. We have to try our best to also practice in that way. So these are some aspects of just these couple of verses. It's about once again, it ties back to our haya. Haya is having a sense of modesty in the way that we go about things, right? So if there is like a group of, I'll give you some more examples. If you are, let's say, you go to a party, and in general, we try, to stay within our mahram, within the women. If there's a group of, let's say, teenage boys sitting in one room, and you have a lot of choices where to go sit, the modest thing to do will be not, to choose to sit somewhere which is appropriate. Like perhaps you could sit with your family, with your girl relatives, or you could even sit with yourself. But if you choose to go and just sit on the couch next to like these teenage boys and just start joking and laughing, this is going against modesty, right? So you have to make modest decisions. That's part of our haya. Somebody with haya is not going to do that. They're going to be careful about guarding their modesty. And that's what Allah also means when he says guard your private parts. There's a lot more to that. It's like kind of like talking about an entire behavior that we do, right? And so, you know, holding ourselves with that dignity, with that consciousness, it's all part of this concept of Haya. And it helps us in the end to stay focused on good things and to have healthy relationships, to have relationships in which we are cared for, and to be, you know, healthy, you know, spiritual beings. Inshallah, there's a lot more we could probably talk about in this topic, but because we're already out of time, I'm going to jump over to a Kahoot game, inshallah. So, inshallah, I'm going to turn that on and share the screen. I know that's that topic is, it can be like a little bit of a hard topic, especially for, it's not easy sometimes to try to practice these things. But we should know, and this is part of the Kahoot question as well, we should know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows very well the struggle of that we have. The struggle, whether it's the girls struggle to try to cover properly when everyone in the world seems like they're not doing that, whether it's the struggle of being a teenager when there's so many, it's like in this world, what do teenagers do? Usually they're trying to date, they're trying to, do all these things. The concept that they have of fun and fashion, these are struggles. But, we read so many times in the Quran that these struggles have a great reward from Allah. And at times they're considered even jihad, right? Sometimes that is your greatest struggle. There's we may not be asked to leave our home to go fight in that way, but this is a kind of fighting that we do with our own nafs, with our own self. It's an internal kind of fighting. And in the end, we're going to be rewarded by Allah. So I'm going to go ahead and hop over, inshallah, to the Kahoot game. Let me turn that on. So I'm going to, and I think I covered everything that's in this. So I'm going to save my Kahoot, or no, actually, I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. So, yeah, let's go here and play. Okay. So the game pin is 9667954. 9667954. So I'm going to let you all have a minute or two to get on there. I'm very proud of all of you. I know that being a Muslim woman growing up, it takes a lot of character strength. It takes a lot of taqwa and iman. And inshallah, I pray that everyone gets the strength that it takes and the understanding and the calmness that it takes to really practice Islam in the way that we should, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards everyone. So we have 14 players so far, 16. We're almost there. I like y'all's names that show up. They're awesome, mashallah. 9667954. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start. Bismillah. So the very first question, it's just like 8 questions. Very first one. Good job, girls. What is an example of showing adornment? Which example? Noticeable makeup, noticeable perfume, tight-fitting clothing, or all of the above? So what's an example of showing adornment? And the answer is all of the above. Correct. You guys know.
But Miss, doesn't adornment mean like a decoration, not something like?
Right? I think we really need to improve the language they use to translate that word. You're right. Because when I think of an adornment, I think of like, like a decoration in the house. That's what it feels like. But I think that we need to find better words so that we can be like, so that we can understand it better, inshallah. I totally agree with you.
Honestly, I thought adornment meant adoring yourself.
Yeah, that's true. We need to find better. The next question. Oh goodness. Lowering the gaze has an internal component in the heart as well as a physical component in the eyes. That's a true or false? I'm sorry, I didn't get to read it very well. So lowering the gaze has two parts, right? There's an internal part in your heart and a physical component. So if you're going around and you don't even think, or you don't even care, you're not gonna complete this action. But when you realize, no, I have to lower my gaze, there's an internal component, and then you do the action and you lower your eyes, or you change the channel or anything. Those are the two parts to it. Number 4, which of the following is an example of a scene where you should lower your gaze? A woman wearing a bikini, a boy and a girl committing a sin like embracing a kiss, people drinking alcohol in a party, or all of the above? Which of the, yes, exactly. So all of those are examples where you should switch the channel, lower your gaze, pick a different YouTube, or pick a different, or not look at that. So those are all examples there. Number 5, what does Surah Ahzab verse 33 say? We just did this one. And this is the one where it said, to make sure we give poor due charity, do not make a dazzling display, build house free from interest, or none of the above. Yes, so the answer is do not make a dazzling display and value staying at home. Yes, very good. I know that was a lot of reading in 10 seconds. Okay, true or false? The unique struggles Muslim women have for hijab and modesty are rewarded by Allah immensely. Is that true or false? The unique struggles a Muslim woman have. Yes, all of you got that right. You'll get lots and lots of reward from Allah. And number 7, true or false? Hijab has many aspects, including loose, modest clothing, preventing noticeable makeup, and noticeable perfume. Is that true or false? Oh, another one that you guys all got right. I'm so proud of y'all, mashallah. Y'all are awesome. Number 8, the reason girls should speak in a professional way is because why? In case a man looks at them with desire or can feel attracted, to save their energy for Quran, because women are not intelligent, or we need to compete for the best career. Yes, well, so you got that right. So that is the reason. It's not because we are less, it's because to, kind of protect ourselves from others. So we have 3rd place, Lena Kuser, 7 out of 8, excellent. 2nd place, Maliha, always doing good. 1st place today, Fatima Mustaha, I'm really proud of you. We also have Aisha Sayed and Farah. All of you guys did good, and I know on the report it's going to say that a lot of you did really good. So if I look on the report quickly, out of the 18, look at all these people who got 100% right. Very good. You guys are awesome, mashallah. So I'm going to do a very quick dua. جزاكم الله خيرا سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. I do want to remind you that Friday and Saturday we do not have meetings scheduled, but we will meet back on Sunday, June the 7th at the same time and same place, inshallah. So enjoy your weekend. Consider what we talked about, inshallah, and I look forward to seeing you again, inshallah, on Sunday, okay? All right, everybody, have a good weekend. Any questions? Yes.
Will we have Girl Scouts the whole summer?
Yeah, I'm going to take it a month at a time and see how the situation is. I would love to meet, inshallah. So if things are, in the same situation, we can meet on Zoom. And then if we see that in July things have changed, then we will adapt accordingly. So inshallah, this particular class is all the way until the last day of June. And then we will see how we do things in July, inshallah. Yeah, but I love seeing you guys. So I would always love to meet with y'all in any way, shape, or form.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam, everyone. Jazakallah khair.